Welcome to the Data Storytelling session. At the last Polar Data Forum, data storytelling was just kind of emerging into this area. And I think we only had 2 talks for data storytelling, and we actually have a pretty full slate for this. So to get us started, I'm going to invite up Yannick to speak. And Yannick Campbell is from University of Manitoba's Centre for Earth Observation Science.
Thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. As Shannon mentioned, I'm Yannick Campbell, and I'm a data curator for the Canadian Watershed Information Network, and we're a part of the Centre for Earth Observation Science. My data manager is Claire Herbert, who is unfortunately not able to join us today. But I just wanted to give an example today of how we can use data stories as a tool for enhancing data accessibility and creating engaging and accessible resources for communicating science. Okay. So in order for us to tell a really good data story, we have to first understand the data that we're working with. However, open access does not always mean open understanding. And this became very apparent to me when I was in the process of creating this story and looking for, publicly available data sets. And while the files may be easy to find, understanding the variables used in the file or finding the appropriate metadata on how to use and analyze the data sets, that can be quite a tedious process. So the files might be findable, but accessing meaningful information is a whole other story. So this is something we talk about all the time. How can we make our data more reusable or easy to reuse in our repositories? And as someone who works with researchers all the time, or data providers to upload their data, I still have a lot of preaching and teaching to do, but we try to impart the basic best practices of ensuring that your table has understandable variables. So whether in your data file itself or defined in a data dictionary, ensuring that your table is well structured, using appropriate data types, formats, and consistent units. And of course, ensuring that you have sufficient metadata or supplemental information so that it really isn't a pain for you to reuse your data. So once your data is understandable and interpretable, you can create these really meaningful stories. And data storytelling takes many forms, as you will see today, I'm sure. But the idea is that we're weaving different pieces of data or information to create a simpler, more intuitive picture of what the science is saying. So we're moving from just raw information to actual understanding of the data. And we like to call that piece the action piece at Canwin. So that knowledge. So that understanding or knowledge is really what's going to bolster curiosity and engagement and action or decision making from the public. So the case for simple interactive stories, why is this important? Well, first of all, not everyone has the skills to deal with raw, messy data, right? The simplicity of data stories allows a user to focus on the meaning behind the data as opposed to spending their time trying to decode the data. And interactivity simply makes the science more fun. When you can zoom in and slide and click, you're not just looking at numbers in a spreadsheet, you're actually engaging with the data. And the researchers also benefit from this process, right? So researchers, they're good scientists, but they're not necessarily good storytellers by default. A lot of the times you ask a researcher, what is your research about? And they give you a really complicated answer. And for the sake of not looking dumb, I'm usually like, okay, cool, totally understand. I really don't understand. But it really helps them when they have to break things down to create a story. It helps them to clarify their thinking about their work, and a lot of times they uncover new insights. It helps them to build their communication skills, in particular when they're doing outreach or they have to do interviews to explain their work to the public. And it helps them to think about the real-world impact of their research, which really is what people actually care about. So there are many different ways to tell a data story. In my example, I used Flourish Studio, which is a data visualization and storytelling platform, and I embedded those visualizations in Canva for the layout. And this is really just a simple introductory story about essentially climate change, what's been going on around Antarctica and the Southern Ocean. And this is a prelude to more in-depth work being done by one of our researchers at U of M, Frank Gomsey. So this was just my workflow and how I put this story together. Of course, I started out by chatting with Frank, finding out what he's working on. So he's doing a lot of data analysis right now, so we didn't want to share that data. So we decided, okay, this is going to be more of an introductory story to his work. Then I went ahead and sort of structured the story out on my whiteboard and decided on the flow that I wanted for the user or the viewer. And then I found relevant data online and went through my typical curation process, structuring the tables, organizing the data well, and so on. Then I went on to Flourish and chose that visualization that best depicted the data that I wanted to show. And then I shaped the data. And I think this was the most time-consuming part because when you choose a template on Flourish, it has an example of the data, which is very helpful. But my key tip is to just look at that data and how they have structured it, and then structure yours accordingly so that it can fit the graph or the map that you want to use. And then you can go ahead and design your graphic in Flourish or your layout in Canva. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of Flourish Studio if you've never seen it before. So it gives you quite a few options of templates to use for charts, maps, and image visualizations. There's a filter there on the left that you can filter by the type or the purpose of the visualization. They do have an API which you can feel free to use and completely customize your graphs and maps. I have not tried that. I've just used the basic templates that they have here. So when you click on a template in Flourish, you'll get two tabs. You'll have that preview tab, which obviously allows you to preview your chart, but this data tab here allows you to upload the data and perform basic editing on the data set. So you can pivot the table, you can change the data type and so on. You can't do a lot of editing, so you really need to clean and curate your data before uploading it, but it does allow you to do those basic edits. And this is where you bind the columns in your chart, in your table, sorry, to the chart features you want. So you can say, okay, these columns are the values. This column will change the size of the circles or the size of the spikes or the colors and so on. So you bind your columns to the features you want in your chart. And then the preview tab is going to let you see what your chart is looking like, but the settings panel on the right there is going to allow you to customize your chart. So the colors, labels, the entire behavior, the animations, all of that would be controlled in that panel there. So that was just a little overview. And now I'm just going to show you a quick overview of my pretty simple story. So again, it's about observed changes on and around Antarctica using publicly available data sets. So this is my front page of my story, and again I used Canva and I used the website template, and that allowed me to have those tabs there for the different sections of my story.
I think it's because you're on a slideshow mode. Maybe that's why it's not playing properly.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There we go. Thank you. So sorry. Now I can play the... Okay. Okay, that was the first. Okay, sorry. So this is my introduction. So it's just a couple of pages that talk about the topic and why it is important. There's no data here, but the nice thing about Canva is that you can incorporate your animations and graphics all in the same template. The next slide talks about how the data was collected, and it really highlights some of the challenges with collecting data on Antarctica. This was something that Frank and I talked about, as well as some limitations with the weather stations. The weather stations on Antarctica. So this is my first Flourish map here, and it's just showing the different weather stations on Antarctica. It's interactive. The spikes represent the different elevations of the stations. It has a nice search feature as well, where you can just search for a certain station and it pops up. This other graph is also map is also showing the stations, but it has a timeline feature, so you can see the weather station's deployment over time. Of course, it's also interactive. You can just click on each point to see more information. And this other map is actually showing data now, so it's showing the temperature changes over time at the different stations. And okay, so what I wanted to mention here is that Flourish also has a story feature. So it's essentially slides, but the cool thing about it is that you can interact with a map or a graph, and it saves that interaction. And I can't pause. So it just, you can put together different slides, but then it will save each interaction you make as its own slide as you go through, which is pretty cool. So here I'm just showing different examples of line graphs that are showing air temperatures over a certain station that has the longest record. And then I go into talking about Argo flows, which is the main data source that Frank will be using to supplement the limited data on Antarctica. This map is their flow map, and it shows trajectory data, anything that has a start and end location. So in this case, I'm showing the Argo float's trajectory in the Southern Ocean. Okay, so my next section is changes, what's going on and around Antarctica. So I talk a bit about how the region has been warming. This is a graph here, area graph showing temperatures over two common stations on Antarctica, Faraday and Rothera. And I talk a bit about how the sea ice has been declining recently. And this is their line race chart, which I really like. It's really cool with multiple lines. I obviously just have one here, but it just kind of shows you how things are moving over time. There's a feature for you to like zoom in, add annotations, add images to the end of the lines, and so on. It's pretty cool. Then I talk about how sea levels have been rising, have a cumulative sea level change chart here. The next example is just a story that looks at that cumulative change, but just with different types of graphs. So a line graph with a drop down where you can select the months, an area chart, and in this case, the legend is interactive, so you can, oh, this is also a drop down, sorry. And they also have quite a few templates for images as well. So this is their slider example. So it's really good for, you know, looking at before and afters or differences between two images. So my next section just talks about Frank and his research, and this is their grid. This image that you see here, this is their grid template, and you can add multiple images to create this grid of images, but it has a nice pop-up feature. You can click on the image and see more information or more images or whatever you want to add there. And I talk about what he's been up to and the importance of his work. And that's pretty much the introductory story. So the idea here is that once Frank has finished processing his data and he's ready to publish, that data will be published on Canwin, and we'll create a project and dataset page for him. And this story will be published alongside the data as well. And then we will create a more in-depth story based on the findings that he has published. And that's my little example. Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, there is one.
Yes.
So, yep, that's on. So often scientists will just make their plots and so forth in whatever they were using to do the analysis, whether it be Python, R, Excel. Does this have the same, obviously it's beautiful, the plots you can create. Do you have the same flexibility in and control over what your image looks like?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't, if you're using just the templates, you would not have that same, but if you're using the API, then you have way more control and flexibility over your graphs and charts. So if you are a programmer at heart and that's what you want to do, definitely using the API would be a good option. But this is more so if you don't want to.
Yeah, no.
Create your graphs.
It looks like great fun. I'm gonna go play with it later.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions for you? All right, well, you can always catch her throughout the conference if you want to speak with
Chat
me
some more.
personally.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.